The rain came down harder than usual that night, painting the small town of Brookfield in silver and gray. The thunder rolled across the sky as Emily Walker sat alone in her room, staring out the window. The storm outside matched the storm inside her heart. It had been 6 months since her mother married again, and life hadn't been the same since. Their new house still smelled like paint and new furniture, and her new stepbrother, Ryan Carter, had brought with him a quiet tension that filled every hallway. Ryan was calm, always composed, and sometimes that calmness made Emily uneasy. He wasn't cold, but he was distant, like someone who carried too much inside and didn't know how to let it out. He had a gentle voice, deep but soft, and a smile that appeared only when it really meant something. Emily noticed those things, even though she tried not to. She didn't understand why she paid attention to the way he tucked his sleeves, or the way he always fixed broken things around the house without being asked. Maybe because her mother adored him like the son she never had. Maybe because he made the house feel steadier. Or maybe because, deep down, Emily felt something she couldn't name. That night, the wind grew wild. The old trees outside bent and groaned, and somewhere in the house, a door slammed. Emily flinched. Then she heard another sound, the rattling of the old back door downstairs. It was shaking against the frame, the wind pressing hard from outside. She grabbed a sweater and hurried down the stairs barefoot, her hair falling loose around her face. The back door was old, left over from before they moved in. It never locked properly. As she reached it, the latch snapped open and the door swung wide, letting in a blast of cold rain. She grabbed the handle, pulling hard, but the wind fought back. Her socks slipped on the wet tiles, and she lost her balance. Falling against the door frame before she could get up, she heard Ryan's voice behind her. Emily. He ran in from the hallway, his shirt half soaked from the rain he'd just come in from. He didn't hesitate. He rushed to her side, catching her by the arm just as the wind forced the door open again. Together, they tried to push it shut, but the storm was stronger than both of them. The old hinges squeaked, the frame cracked, and with a loud snap, one hinge broke loose. The entire door swung backward, hitting the wall hard before falling half off its frame. The sudden force threw Emily off balance again. Ryan caught her just in time, pulling her into him before she could fall. They hit the ground together, the noise of the storm filling the room. For a few seconds, the world was nothing but the sound of the rain, the wind, and the beating of her heart against his chest. Ryan's arm was around her back, steady and warm despite the cold air. She looked up at him, her breath trembling. His eyes met hers, full of concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm but low. She nodded slowly, realizing how close they were. "I'm fine," she whispered. She stopped herself, her words lost between them. Ryan helped her sit up, glancing at the door, now hanging awkwardly on one hinge. "Guess I broke the door," he said with a faint, nervous smile. Emily let out a small laugh, still shaken. "Yeah, you did. You're going to have to fix that before Mom gets home." He stood and offered her a hand. "You shouldn't have tried to pull it alone. It's too heavy for one person." She looked at him, a mix of gratitude and something else flickering in her chest. "I didn't think. I just didn't want it to fly open." Ryan glanced toward the rain still pouring outside. "Let's leave it for now. I'll deal with it in the morning." He helped her close it as best as they could and pushed a chair against it to keep it from opening again. The room smelled of rain and cold air. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, still feeling the warmth from his touch. "Thanks," she said quietly. "You didn't have to run in like that." Ryan looked at her with a faint smile. "You don't have to thank me. I just didn't want you to get hurt." Something about the way he said it lingered in the air. It wasn't just constant, it was care. Real care. The kind that made her heart ache a little. He turned toward the stairs. "Get some rest, okay?" She nodded, watching him go. When he disappeared into the hallway, she stood there for a moment longer, listening to the sound of his footsteps fade. Then she looked at the broken door again. It was strange how one small moment could change the way everything felt. The storm still raged outside, but now her heart felt louder. Every flash of lightning reminded her of how close he had been. Every rumble of thunder echoed the way her pulse had quickened when he caught her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment again and again, the way his arm had wrapped around her waist, the steady beat of his heart against her, the softness in his eyes when he asked if she was okay. It wasn't just gratitude she felt. It was something deeper, something that made her uneasy and curious all at once. She told herself it was wrong to think about him that way. He was her stepbrother now. But her heart didn't seem to care about logic. It only remembered how safe it felt when he held her. Outside, the wind began to calm. The rain softened into a quiet drizzle. The broken door downstairs swayed lightly, creaking against the chair Ryan had placed. The house was quiet again, but inside Emily's chest, everything was louder than before. The next morning, the sun would rise, and things would look normal again. She would see Ryan at breakfast, probably pretending nothing had happened. They would talk about fixing the door and about her mom's weekend trip to Portland. But no matter how normal things appeared, she knew something invisible had shifted between them. That storm had taken more than just the door, it had taken the simple, ordinary space between them and replaced it with something neither of them could name. As the thunder faded into the distance, Emily turned onto her side, pulling the blanket close. She could still feel his warmth, still hear his voice. "Are you okay?" he had asked, and she was but she also knew deep down that after that night, nothing in that house would ever feel quite the same again. And just before she drifted off to sleep, she whispered to herself, almost in disbelief, "He broke the door. But maybe he opened something else." The storm outside ended, but a new one began quietly in her heart, a storm that wouldn't break doors but feelings. The next morning the storm was gone, leaving behind clear skies and the smell of wet earth. Sunlight filled the kitchen as Emily poured herself a cup of coffee. The night's chaos still played in her mind, the crash, the broken door, and Ryan's arms around her. She tried to shake it off, but her heart wouldn't let her forget. Every small sound in the house made her wonder where he was. She soon saw him through the window, already outside fixing the damaged door. His sleeves were rolled up and his hair fell across his forehead as he worked. He looked calm, focused, and completely unaware of the way her eyes followed his every movement. She didn't want to admit it, but something about seeing him, there strong, steady, and patient, made her chest tighten. Her mother had left early for work, leaving the two of them alone in the quiet house. Emily stood at the door for a moment before walking out to him. The morning air was cool. Drops of water still clung to the leaves. "You really know how to make noise in the middle of the night," she said, trying to sound light. Ryan turned, his expression softening when he saw her. "Good morning. Did you sleep at all?" "Barely," she said, folding her arms. "You broke a door, remember?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made her feel both calm and nervous. "Yeah, and now I'm fixing it." "Seems fair." Emily stepped closer, watching him hammer a hinge back into place. "You really can fix anything, can't you?" "Not everything," he replied quietly, "but I try." For a while, neither of them said much. The silence wasn't awkward, it was heavy, like it carried too many unspoken things. She noticed the way the sunlight caught the edge of his jaw, the way his hand brushed dust from the wood. She told herself to stop staring, but she didn't. Finally, she broke the silence. "Thanks for helping me last night. If you hadn't come down, that door probably would have hit me." Ryan set the hammer down and turned to her. "You don't need to thank me for that, Emily. You'd have done the same." "Maybe," she said softly, "but still, it meant something." He studied her for a moment, like he was trying to find the right words. "You scared me last night," he admitted. "When I saw you fall, I just reacted. I didn't even think." Emily smiled slightly, her heart warming at the honesty in his voice. "You always seem so calm. It's strange to think you get scared." "I do," he said, "more than I like to admit." There was a pause long enough for her to feel the distance between them shrinking. Then she said, half teasing but half serious, "You're always kind, Ryan. It's kind of annoying." He looked confused. "Annoying." She laughed nervously. "Yeah, because it makes it hard not to like you." Ryan froze, and she instantly wished she could take the words back. He looked away, gripping the edge of the broken door. The air changed, quiet but sharp. "Emily," he said after a moment, his voice steady but low, "you shouldn't say things like that." "I didn't mean," she started, but she couldn't finish, because deep down she knew she did mean it. He stepped back from the door, taking a slow breath. "It's just been a long week. Let's not make things complicated." Before she could answer, a sudden gust of wind came through again, rattling the door against its frame. The sound broke the tension. Ryan turned back to tighten the hinge, pretending to focus while Emily stood there silently, trying to gather herself. She wanted to say something to apologize, or maybe to explain, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she quietly turned around and walked back into the house, her heart pounding louder with every step. Inside, she leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. Why did she say that? Why did it feel both wrong and right at the same time? He was her stepbrother. They were family now, at least by name. But none of that stopped what she felt. It wasn't something she could control. It was just their life, confusing and growing stronger every day. An hour later, Ryan came inside. He had finished fixing the door. "All done," he said simply. "Shouldn't give us trouble anymore." Emily nodded without meeting his eyes. "Thanks." He picked up his jacket and hesitated. "I'm heading to town. Need to pick up a few things." "'Kay," she said quietly. When he left, the silence filled the room again. Emily walked to the back door and ran her fingers over the smooth wood. The new hinge was strong, the paint slightly chipped, but it looked better than before. She smiled to herself, though it felt bittersweet. He had fixed the door, but he had also built a wall between them. That night, the house was peaceful again, but Emily's thoughts were not. She lay awake, staring at the same window as the night before. The storm outside was gone, but the storm inside her wasn't. She kept thinking about how his voice sounded when he said her name. How careful and gentle he had been. Every little thing about him stood out. Now the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. The way he stirred his coffee. The way he avoided looking at her too long. She noticed it all, and it made her heart ache. The next morning, they sat across from each other at breakfast. Her mom was talking about weekend plans, but Emily could barely focus. She just kept glancing at Ryan, who was nodding politely, pretending to listen. Their eyes met once, just for a second. And it was enough to remind them both that something had changed, something neither could undo later. As Ryan headed out for work, Emily stood at the window watching him leave. He waved lightly, a quiet, almost uncertain smile on his face. She waved back, forcing a small smile of her own. When he was gone, she sighed deeply, pressing her hand against the cool glass. It was just one night, one accident, one broken door. But it had opened something she didn't expect, something real. Something she couldn't easily close. She didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was certain. The air between them had changed forever. That evening, the repaired door stood perfectly still, locked and strong. But Emily knew that no matter how well it had been fixed, she could still feel the crack hidden underneath the surface, just like the one in her heart. She whispered to herself, "He fixed the door, but I'm still broken." The sun dipped below the horizon, and the house went quiet again. Yet somewhere inside that silence was the faint echo of everything they hadn't said, the feelings that both of them would try to hide, and the secret that was only just beginning to unfold. The days after the storm felt quieter, but not in a peaceful way. Emily noticed it first, the silence that grew between her and Ryan. He still moved around the house like before, fixing things, helping her mom, being polite, but something about him had changed. He didn't meet her eyes the same way, didn't linger in the kitchen in the mornings, and didn't smile as easily. He was careful now, too careful. Emily tried to pretend she didn't care, but every time she saw him pass by, her heart ached a little. Before the storm, he used to ask how her day was or tease her about her late-night snacks. Now he just nodded and walked away. It was as if a wall had quietly risen between them overnight. One evening, when the sun was low and the house was quiet, Emily went out to the backyard. The repaired door stood strong, shining faintly in the golden light. Ryan was sitting on the steps, his elbows resting on his knees, staring into the distance. He looked tired, not physically, but in a way that came from holding too much inside. She walked closer, her voice soft. "You're avoiding me." Ryan didn't look at her right away. "No, I'm just busy pretending nothing happened," she asked. He sighed and rubbed his hands together. "Emily, please don't start this." She sat beside him anyway, her voice trembling. "I don't want to fight. I just want to understand. Did I say something wrong? Did I ruin everything?" He turned to her finally, his eyes filled with the same quiet sadness she'd seen that night. "You didn't ruin anything," he said. "I'm just trying to keep things right, right?" She repeated. "You mean pretending we don't feel what we feel?" Ryan's jaw tightened. He looked away, his voice low. "You're my stepsister, Emily. I shouldn't have let things get confusing." She felt her heart sink. "Confusing?" she whispered. "You make it sound like it was a mistake." He hesitated, then said quietly, "It was an accident. The storm, the moment. It just happened. But we can't let it turn into something else." Emily stared at him, her chest tightening. "So that's what it was to you? Just something that happened." Ryan closed his eyes, his voice breaking slightly. "No, that's the problem. I didn't feel like just something. And that's exactly why I have to be careful." They sat in silence, the only sound, the faint rustle of leaves and the soft hum of the wind. Emily looked at him and saw the struggle written all over his face. He wasn't cold. He was conflicted, caught between what he felt and what he thought was right. She spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can't stop feeling something just because it's complicated." He looked at her with a mix of affection and regret. "You're right, but that doesn't mean we can act on it. You and I were a family now. Even if it doesn't feel like it, that's what the world will see." Her eyes filled with tears she didn't want him to see. "Why does it matter what the world sees? You know what's real? Because sometimes what's real isn't what's right," he said softly. The words hung between them like a quiet wound. Emily turned away, wiping her eyes. "You're not being fair. I'm trying to be responsible," Ryan replied. She stood up suddenly, unable to bear the weight of the moment. "Maybe responsibility is just another word for running away." He didn't answer. She walked back into the house, her heart pounding, her mind spinning. For the first time, she wished the storm would come back, just so it could drown out everything she was feeling that night. She stayed awake again, listening to the faint sound of rain starting to fall outside. The memory of that night played in her mind like a movie she couldn't pause. His voice, his arms, his warmth. She pressed her pillow to her chest, trying not to cry. The next few days passed in slow motion. Ryan kept his distance. He went to work early, came home late, and spoke only when necessary. Her mother noticed the quietness but assumed it was just the stress of settling into family life. Emily wanted to tell her everything, but she couldn't. How could she explain that her heart had chosen someone she wasn't supposed to love? One evening, she found herself back by the repaired door again. The paint had dried smooth and the hinges were strong. But she couldn't look at it without remembering how he had held her that night. It wasn't just a door anymore, it was a reminder of everything she couldn't have. Then she heard footsteps. Ryan was behind her. She turned, surprised to see him standing there, his expression unreadable. "I'm leaving for a few days," he said. "Work trip, 'kay?" she said quietly. "Okay." He hesitated before continuing. "I think it'll be good for both of us. Some space might help." Emily nodded, though her chest tightened painfully. "Sure, maybe you're right." There was a pause, and then she asked softly, "Do you ever think about that night?" Ryan didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Every day." Her heart skipped. "Then why are you walking away?" "Because I have to," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If I don't, we'll end up in a place we can't come back from." Emily looked at him, tears gathering in her eyes. "Maybe we're already there." For a moment, they just stood there, two people who wanted to reach for each other but couldn't. The tension was thick, painful and beautiful all at once. He finally stepped closer as if to say something, but her phone buzzed on the counter. It was her mom. She was coming home early from her business trip. Ryan stepped back instantly, putting space between them. "You should get that," he said quietly. She glanced at the phone, then back at him. But he was already walking toward the stairs. The moment was gone. When her mother got home, the house felt alive again, filled with chatter and normal sounds. But for Emily, it all felt hollow. Ryan smiled politely, joked with her mom, and acted like everything was fine. But when their eyes met across the dinner table, she could see the truth. He was hurting too. Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, Emily went to her window. The moonlight spilled across the backyard, illuminating the fixed door that now stood perfectly straight. It looked flawless, but she knew better. Beneath the smooth surface, there were still cracks hidden, but real. Just like them. She whispered to the night, "You can fix a door, Ryan, but how do you fix a heart?" The wind carried no answer, only silence. That night she dreamed of the storm again, the broken door, the sound of the rain, and his arms around her. Except this time, when she looked up, he was gone, and all she could hear was the echo of his voice saying goodbye. When she woke up, she knew something for sure. Distance wouldn't heal what they felt. It would only make it harder to forget. The morning Ryan was set to leave came faster than Emily expected. The sky was pale gray, the kind of color that made everything feel a little heavier. Boxes sat by the front door, neatly packed. His duffel bag rested on the couch. Emily stood at the top of the stairs, watching him move around quietly. He didn't look rushed. But every small movement carried the weight of something final. Her mom was already at work, leaving just the two of them again one last time. The silence in the house felt familiar now, the kind that said everything they couldn't. Emily came downstairs slowly, her heart beating too fast for a normal morning. "So this is really happening," she said, trying to sound calm. Ryan looked up from his suitcase. His eyes were soft, but his smile was tired. "Yeah, I got the job in Seattle. It's a good opportunity." She nodded. "I know, it's just sudden. It's been coming for a while," he said. "I think we both knew I couldn't stay forever." His words stung more than she wanted them to. She forced a small laugh, trying to hide it. "You're leaving before breakfast." "That's cold," he chuckled lightly. "You'd just burn the toast again." For a second, they both smiled, and it felt like the old Daisy simple, easy, before everything got complicated. But then the moment faded, replaced by a silence that neither of them knew how to fill. Emily leaned against the counter, her voice softer now. "Does Mom know you're leaving today?" "She does. I told her last night, so you told her before me." Ryan sighed. "I didn't want to make it harder than it already is." She looked at him carefully. "You think leaving without saying goodbye would make it easier?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, but staying would have made it impossible." Those words hit her like a quiet blow. She wanted to argue, to ask him to stay, but she could see in his eyes that he had already made up his mind. He wasn't running from her, he was trying to protect them both. Still, her heart didn't understand logic. It just wanted him there. "Seattle's far," she whispered. "It's not that far," he said softly. "You can visit, but it won't be the same." He looked down, his hands tightening around the bag strap. "Maybe that's a good thing." Emily blinked away the tears gathering in her eyes. "You sound like you've already forgotten everything." Ryan stepped closer, his voice gentle. "You know, I could never forget, Emily. But sometimes remembering hurts more than letting go." For a long moment, neither spoke. The ticking clock in the kitchen was the only sound between them. Then she finally said, "You always fix things. You fix doors, walls, everything. So tell me, how do you fix this?" Ryan looked at her for a long time before answering. "Some things you don't fix. You just learn to live with the cracks." Her throat tightened. She turned away, pretending to check the boxes. "You're still annoying," she muttered. He smiled faintly. "And you're still impossible to forget." That small exchange broke the tension just enough for both of them to breathe again. Emily walked him to the truck outside. The driveway was wet from last night's rain, and the air smelled of pine. Ryan loaded the last box into the back, then turned to face her. "This place is going to feel empty without you," she said. "You'll fill it," he replied. "You always do." She looked at him, her eyes glistening. "I wish we met in another way. Not like this. Not as family." He didn't answer for a few seconds. "Maybe then it would have been easier to stay," finally said. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she didn't bother to hide it. "You're just going to drive away, huh?" He gave her a sad smile. "If I don't go now, I might never leave." That was the moment Emily realized it wasn't distance that was keeping them apart, was the rules they had to live by. They both knew the world wouldn't understand, so they chose to let go before it could destroy them. Ryan opened the truck door and paused. "You'll be okay, right?" Emily nodded, even though she didn't feel okay at all. "Yeah, I'll keep the door fixed. That'll be my job now." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Just promise me you'll stop walking barefoot on wet floors." "I'll try," she said, managing a small smile. He hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged her. It wasn't a long hug, but it was one of those quiet ones that say everything words can't. Emily closed her eyes, memorizing the way it felt warm, safe, heartbreaking. When he finally pulled back, he didn't say goodbye. He just looked at her for a second longer, then turned and got into the truck. As the engine started, Emily stepped back, watching him through blurred eyes. He waved once before driving off, the sound of the tires fading down the street. She stood there until the truck disappeared around the corner, her heart heavy, her hands trembling. When she finally turned back toward the house, she stopped by the repaired back door. The paint had dried completely now, smooth and perfect. She ran her fingers over the surface and smiled sadly. Beneath the paint, she could still feel the faint ridges where the wood had cracked. Ryan had done a good job fixing it, but she could tell it would never be the same. She whispered to herself, "You fixed the door, but you broke my heart." Inside, the house felt too quiet. Every sound, the clock ticking, the creak of the stairs, reminded her that he was gone. She went to the kitchen, made coffee, and sat by the window. Outside, the wind brushed softly against the trees. It's the same way it had the night they'd met by the broken door. Time passed slowly that day. Her mother came home, cheerful and tired from work. Emily smiled, helped with dinner, and said nothing about Ryan leaving. She didn't want to talk about it. Some things were too deep for words. That night, when the house went still again, Emily walked to the back door one more time. She opened it slightly and looked at the stars. The sky was clear, no storm, no clouds, just calm. For the first time, she realized that sometimes calm could hurt more than chaos. She whispered softly, "Goodbye, Ryan." Then she closed the door gently, locking it. Days turned into weeks. Life went on, as it always does. Emily went back to college, her mother talked about holidays, and the house slowly adjusted to its new rhythm. But no matter how busy things got, there were moments when she would pause by that door, her hand brushing against the smooth wood, and remember, it wasn't the pain she remembered most, it was the warmth, the care, the quiet love that existed in the spaces between words. It was something she couldn't define, but it had changed her forever. And though Ryan was far away, sometimes she imagined him standing by another door somewhere in Seattle, maybe thinking of her too. Because some bonds don't fade, they just live quietly inside you, waiting, like light behind closed doors.